Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the first of these presentations that I'm going to be running over the next few weeks, just to really come in and explain what the Game Changing Book Blueprint is all about, what to expect in the next few weeks on these Monday masterclasses. I've taken clients through the process of not just writing their book, but finding their signature stories, really defining for them what is the voice and the message and the way that they tell their story. And before we do that, we really have to establish some key inner points, such as why and what and how, to really be able to tap into the greatest power of creating not just a great book and a best selling book, but a game changing book. And there is a blueprint for this. You know, 50 years ago, 60, 70, 100 years ago, an author was just able to write their brilliant manuscript either on a typewriter or, pen to paper, or even quill to paper, and pass it over to the publishing house and to the department that would take care of all the business and the uh, distribution, the commercials, the marketing, and set that author up maybe on a book tour or a speaking tour. Well, those days are done and gone. An author today doesn't just give their manuscript over to a publishing house. Today, an author really needs to be in charge of their distribution and their creativity and their marketing and their intellectual property, and knowing everything that you want to achieve with your book and where you want your book to go is the first step in finding out exactly how to strategize that. What is the blueprint? What stories do you want to be known for? Where would you like to see your book go? Is it a traditional publishing? Is it a hybrid or indie publishing? Is it a self publishing? What would you like your book to be a catalyst for? How would you like to have your stories impact the world? So, if you're with me, let's take it on to the next step. Did you know that 81% of people want to write a book? 81 I mean, just think of it. Every single person that you know around you has probably at one point in their life thought about writing a book, just considered it. But only 95% of those that start a book actually ever finish. Or actually, 95% of people begin writing their book and then it gets left in their drawer somewhere or in their laptop, in their documents. A very few percent of the people who want to write a book actually finish it. And then take it another step. Only 1% of the ones that finish it actually ever take it to see the light of day, to actually publish it, to bring it out into the world. So, which one are you? Just really ask yourself that. Have you always wanted to write a book? Have you started? Maybe you've started more than one. Maybe you have journals and diaries and little post it notes all around your house of books that you have started but never actually seen to completion. Well, there's a reason for that. The reason that you don't continue and see it to completion is because you have not actually put into place the fundamental steps in envisioning where it'll go. There's a great TED talk by Simon Sinek that talks about beginning with your why. Because when you have a strong enough why, the how, the tools, will become easy, will become self evident. So, we're going to look at what is your why? Why do you want to write a book? Some people want to write a book to memorialize. So, often this is a memoir or an autobiography or some experience that you've had that you're an expert in. You went through a life that you learned so many lessons, whether by one chapter of your life or maybe your whole life in totality, that you now want to teach that to other people. Maybe it's even that you lived a life that was so rich and interesting, and yet you know that your grandchildren's children or your great grandchildren or generations beyond will never get to hear this wisdom unless you actually put it down on paper and memorialize it for them to pass on through the generations, to have a little piece of your legacy for what you want to leave behind. There's a great story that Alfred Nobel sat down one morning, opened up the newspaper with his cup of coffee in the morning, and on the first page of the newspaper, he read a headline that said, Alfred Nobel, discoverer of TNT, passed away yesterday. And Nobel's reading it, thinking, how could this be? I'm alive. I'm reading this. How can it possibly be that this is my obituary? And yet, it was a wake-up call. He realized that the legacy that he was leaving was as the inventor of something that has the capacity to destruct, has the capacity for destruction. And he wanted to have a legacy for the things that were truly important to him. And that's what we know him as now, someone who went on to leave their legacy and leave a fund and leave a platform for honoring literature and peace and mathematics and science, and to have an honoring of his name. So is that the book that you want to write to memorialize what your name, what your life, what your legacy stands for? Or is it to build credibility? Now, when we get into strategic talk a little bit later in our sessions in the master classes, we will talk. There's a big strategic lesson or a strategic way, a plan of attack that in order to build your credibility. So if you are an expert or an authority or a subject matter expert, a SME in your corporation or in your field, and in the old days, it was that you would be able to walk into a networking party or a dinner party and hand somebody your business card, and it had all your details on it, including what you're an expert in. Now, today, I mean, business cards don't really exist as much anymore. People still have them, but even when you do get a business card, it goes into your pocket, it goes into your purse, it ends up in the bottom of a briefcase somewhere, and eventually someone passes by it and says, who is this again? And they don't have a connection to you. Whereas if you've written a book, now you become literally the person who wrote the book on it. You've become seen as the expert as soon as you have a book. And it also gives people an automatic way to have a tangible connection with you. They put it on their nightstand or on their coffee table or on their desk and see it. And very often it will have a picture on the back or on the front. There's some strategies around there, around that option. But they'll feel a connection with you, and it'll be another touch point, a high touch point that they can have with you, that they can actually feel a connectedness to you. They can highlight and dog ear the book, they can lend it to friends, they can talk about it. And building your credibility through word of mouth, the best way to do that is through a book. Is the why that you have to entertain or enlighten others? Very often we see that with fiction or poetry books, just that inspirational and entertaining faction, a great way to get your creative voice out. But that being said, I've written two books that were on the fiction spectrum of the book writing world, and they actually open doors and create a lasting legacy just as much as the memorialized style books, the memoir style books, or the expert style books. So it doesn't just mean that a creative, entertaining, enlightening book only entertains and enlightens. But if that's your why, then there's a very different way that we're going to attack writing it, that we're going to put the writing process. Because if you're entertained and enlightened by your own process, then it's guaranteed you're going to entertain and enlighten others. Interesting people are interested people. So to get people interested in you is you actually have to be really interested in your book and your process. Now, there is no greater, let me save you already hundreds of thousands of dollars on a therapist chair, hundreds of thousands of hours on the sofa of some therapy or group therapist. There is no greater catharsis than your own personal catharsis, getting your book out of your mind, out of your head, out of your heart, and onto paper. I always say you write from your scars, not from your wounds. So if you have a wound, the best way to actually let it heal is to feel it, is to let it open up and let your words flow. Create that scab. Every single author that I've worked with, whether it be fiction or nonfiction, memoir style, in any way expertise, they have something that they're blocked, whether it's to stand up into their expert status, whether it is that they don't yet know how to communicate what it is that they're the authority on, whether they have imposter syndrome. Along the way, they have to show that. They have to air that. They have to bring that out. And that is a personal development step like no other. Writing a book is the biggest catharsis. After all, Ernest Hemingway said, there's nothing to writing a book. You sit down on at your typewriter and just bleed. Books do that. They have you bleed your heart out. And they also have you resolve all the issues so that you're ready to take on that story and ready to share it to the next level. Is your why that it's a passion project? Do you have a book that you would like to write that is a collection of stories that you would like to have get out into the world? Is it that you'd like to bring a lot of authors in together so that they, coming together, have the power to tell a story that you're passionate about or in a field that you're passionate about? Passion projects for books are incredible group building tools, or they're incredible to have as the opening for the not-for-profit organizations that you feel deeply about or that you want to create, or even a passion in the world. Like, is there some give back? Is there something that you know will make a part of the world that you're trying to show, that you're trying to express? Passion projects are an amazing way to build community around a specific passion. Volunteerism is a great example of this. There were many of us who hadn't heard the term volunteerism, hadn't even known that there's this thing that exists called volunteerism. So it's where you volunteer in a geographic location that's different than yours. If you travel to volunteer, volunteerism became a thing, a well-known thing because of all the volunteerists who wrote books about their experience because of their passion for it. There are niches that are being developed around passion projects. Overlanding, for instance, is when people drive their cars or their vehicles, usually rigged up vehicles through different parts of the world. That's a passion project. It could be skiing, it could be salsa dancing, it could be crocheting doilies for teapots. If you have a passion for it, you can create a passion project around it. And the last reason is to make your impact in the world. Now, you can make your impact in the world in any of the previous categories of why you want to write a book. And a book is probably the biggest impact that you make, the biggest way to make an impact. For myself, I know that I wrote 2 books before my 9-year-old daughter turned to me one day and said, "Mama, I want to write a book with you." Here I was empowering people, especially women, empowering women all around the world when my number 1 woman was inspired to write a book with me and I was inspired by her. So if you're only making an impact to one person in the world, just imagine how much your impact means to them. And consider that that's your why, because people are always watching. People are always watching you. So think of who you're inspiring. Then we get into what are the benefits of being a game-changing author. Do you want a lifestyle where you can take your work and go write a book at the beach, write a book in a different location, in a little bistro overlooking the blue aqua water somewhere in the world? Isn't that you want to make an impact on others, have a bigger impact in the world, even in your job, create a living legacy of impact? Even show yourself as a person who's a self-starter so that when you do look to come to the next level in your corporate job, or as in your business, or as an entrepreneur, what impact do you want to make? Is it for freedom? Freedom of independence. You can work anywhere. Uh, you can be mobile. You can work. You can actually have a passive income selling your books. You write it once and it keeps selling even without you doing any more work. That's freedom. There's freedom in that. Or is it for empowerment? I mean, the benefits of empowering yourself and those around you. And who do you want to impact? So just take for a minute, imagine your ideal reader. Imagine the person who is quintessentially the exact person who you would want to read your book, the greatest benefit. Who are they? What are their fears? What are their hopes? What do they desire? You know, many people don't know. We've all heard about the Anne Frank book, The Diary of Anne Frank, but do you actually remember Anne Frank actually wrote her diary to a friend, to an imaginary friend? And she knew everything about that girl, who they were, who she was, what her fears were, her hopes and her desires. And when she wrote, it wasn't just to the blank page, but it was to that person. Your ideal reader, they say if you write for everyone, you're actually writing for no one. So think of one person and write towards them, and actually write them a love letter. And then imagine that 1 month after your book comes out, you happen to be somewhere out in the world and you overhear people speaking about your book. One of those people is your ideal reader telling her friends or his friends about your book. What do you hear them saying? Listen in. What are they saying about your book? What impact did your book have on them? What impact did your stories have on them? What are the salient signature stories that they're listening to, picking up on and saying, you know, it reminds me of this story I read in this book. And then they're talking about your book. Envision that and imagine that. And every time as you sit down to write, picture this person and what will they be saying about your book when they are around other people. That's what's going to keep you writing. Because as you go through this journey of writing your book, you will get stopped up. You will have, they have a saying that says that you have writer's block. Well, let me say, writer's block does come up if you forget the why you're writing, if you forget what you're writing for, how you want to impact, and who it is you want to impact. But as soon as you figured out those, the what, the how, the who, and the why, nothing can stop you from writing. Nothing comes in your way. There are no creative blocks because it's a conversation with one of your good friends. And that's how we start to shift the world. And that is how you write a game-changing book. So today, take a paper, write a love letter to a friend, and until the next masterclass, write on. See you next time, everyone.